Hello, I'm back for week 5. So I just completed the 5th week of my hand therapy fieldwork to rotation, and I am here to report that it went well. I would say that this week was a little bit more challenging for me. Uh, you know, I'm realizing mentally that I'm, reaching the halfway point. So sometimes for me, I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe I should be a little further here, or I should be a little further here. But I feel that if you have good communication with your supervisor, you can kind of, make sure that you're where you need to be. So I constantly am asking Steph, like, hey, like, is there something I should be doing here to get better? Or should I be, further here? Make sure you're honest with me. I I want to be told, even if it's going to make me upset, maybe eventually, I'd rather be told than, kind of keep thinking that I'm doing a good job and I'm not. But, we've had conversations and she's like, you need to take time and everything will come together. You know, it's hard from a student's perspective when you're, used to needing to be good at something to get a good grade or doing a test where you either know it or you don't. But here, you have to remember that your supervisor has a lot more experience than you, and like Steph said, you're not supposed to know everything after 12 weeks either. You're going to know a very minuscule amount, no, a lot more than you did, but you're not going to know everything. And I think that having those conversations with your supervisor is really beneficial and something that I really recommend because you can kind of get in a spiral in your head being like, okay, well, maybe it didn't look like I got, like it didn't look like I did very well in that. Or, my supervisor didn't look like she quite understood where I was going with that. And then if you have a conversation with them, maybe they did, and maybe it just, you were overanalyzing something, which I tend to do. So I feel like if you have that open communication, you definitely will prosper more as a student and continue to do well in the fieldwork experience. I would say that there was things that I remember, back in week 1, goniometry, that was rough in week 1. And now that's definitely coming along and, it's not much for me to pick up a goniometer and be like, okay, I'll measure, I feel like those things, when you look back at it, you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't think I was ever going to pick that up. And then you do. And so you can see the progression and you just have to pick up on those little things and be like, okay, yeah, I'm doing well. But there's certain things that I'm just learning to do. I'd say the hardest part for me right now is treatment planning. I know in school we focus a lot on functional tasks. And I think that in hand therapy, you do focus a lot on functional tasks as well. But sometimes you have to really look at the biomechanical aspect and be like looking at the very minute parts, like what do I need this person to be able to do? What are they struggling with? Okay, they're struggling with strength, they're struggling with pain, and they're struggling with range of motion. So then you have to look at that and then go from there. And that might not always mean, okay, well, we're going to go, you know, teach someone or practice toothbrushing. That might be something that you're doing in a different setting. But with us, you know, I really like how Steph has always kind of put it. Once they get the function of their hand back, they're able to do those things. So we have to look at the very small aspects. Do we have to get the DIP moving? Do we have to get the PIP moving? You're looking at those type of things first, which is really important. So it makes it hard sometimes to go, okay, well, I'm going to do this really big grand activity. Sometimes the smaller activities are the best because you need to work on the small things. So I think some of it is me kind of wrapping my head around that I'm in a different setting. In school, you always are kind of looking at a broad overview because you have to cover a lot. But, this is a very different, very specialized setting that you have to remember sometimes it looks different. A lot of times it might look different, but you can make a lot of things functional at the same time. So I think that it's trying to get that creative aspect working. For me, a lot of times right now, I'm really focusing on trying to figure out the anatomy. I'm trying to figure out, okay, well, I think that that's what's happening here. But then how do I fix that? How do I make that better? So you have to understand the anatomy part of it. You have to understand, like, okay, what biomechanically is going on, or what's, happening here that I need to work on or strengthen to be able to oppose the fingers or be able to pick up a toothbrush. So those are just some things that I think I'm really starting to see right now, see those connections now that I am working on and doing. And then the last thing I'd say right now is we write in a form of a SOAP note, and the assessment part right now is the hardest for me. Steph kind of laughs at me because I'm always like, I feel like I should be writing better. I write like a toddler and you write so eloquently. And I it's a struggle for me because I tend to be a good writer in general. But then when it comes to this, it's very much different when you're trying to understand something in your brain. So I'm trying to understand, okay, well, what is actually happening here when I'm watching someone? I'm trying to figure that out. And then for me to be able to put it into words is a lot more difficult than it should seem. But I have seen progression in myself since I've been doing it, but I think that it will just take a lot of time and a lot of practice. It's something that, like, you can't really work on necessarily outside of the clinic because it's really difficult to replicate that. So you just have to kind of continue to watch, figure out, try to process it in your brain as you're watching the patient, and then when you go to write it, then just take your time, try to figure out, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and then your supervisor is going to look over it and probably make it sound a lot better than you might have. But you got the bones. If you got the bones, you're doing something right, at least. So I just try to focus on those little small things, and then know that eventually those pieces are going to start to come together for me. So it's done with week 5 and I'm on to week 6. So that'll be my halfway point.